Mr. Secretary, I plan to ask you some budget questions about the following. The cost of the Qatar plane, where the money from the Army's parade is coming from, or the National Guard deployments to the border, where that funding is coming from. I honor and celebrate the United States Army, but I'd like to know how much this parade is going to cost. I have sent the department letters on several occasions on this, and I'm still waiting for a response. But then something else happened this weekend, and it needs to be addressed, and that is the President's premature and escalatory decision to deploy not only the National Guard troops to Los Angeles, but active duty Marines as well. Mr. Secretary, we're both from Minnesota. I was in the Twin Cities during the riots that followed the murder of George Floyd. Tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets for days. Governor Walz made the decision to call up the Minnesota National Guard. At no point did we, the citizens of Minnesota, request that the Marines be deployed. Our state and local law enforcement, along with our National Guard who have worked on crowd control, were more than enough. They were more than capable of handling this situation. Representative Betty McCollum just took a blowtorch to Trump's decision to send National Guard troops and even active duty Marines into Los Angeles. And let's be clear, she's not wrong to raise the alarm. This isn't just about troop presence. It's about a disturbing pattern of federal overreach masquerading as law and order. McCollum is sounding the siren on multiple fronts. Where's the funding coming from? Who's making the decisions? And why is the federal government barging into situations that state and local forces are fully equipped to handle? She's demanding transparency because Americans deserve to know if their tax dollars are being funneled into politically motivated deployments instead of actual defense needs. And let's not ignore the bigger implication here. When a president uses military force to police domestic cities, that's not strength, it's authoritarian theater. McCollum is drawing a line, calling out the misuse of power and pushing back on a move that raises serious constitutional and democratic red flags. History has proven that law enforcement and the National Guard are more than capable of handling situations more volatile than what happened this weekend. We all see the continuous loops on TV. But this looks nothing like the George Floyd protests or the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles in 1992. Mr. Secretary, this is a deeply unfair position to put our Marines in. Their service should be honored. It should not be exploited. The President has issued an executive order and talked about deploying troops across the country. Los Angeles County has 17,000 law enforcement personnel, and the state of California has 24,000 National Guard troops. So that's why the Los Angeles Chief of Police had this to say, and I quote, "The possible arrival of federal military forces in Los Angeles, in the absence of clear coordination, presents a significant logistical and operational challenge for those of us who are charged with safeguarding the city." End of quote. As I mentioned before, in Minnesota, we train for those things together. Law enforcement officials in Los Angeles are sounding the alarm, and for good reason. The idea of deploying federal troops into the city isn't just unnecessary, it's a logistical nightmare waiting to happen. These officials are already working in coordination with local agencies and the National Guard. Adding federal troops into the mix risks confusion, redundancy, and chaos. This isn't about needing more boots on the ground. It's about maintaining operational control, clear communication, and respect for local jurisdiction. When the federal government parachutes in with military forces, it disrupts the chain of command and undermines the trust built between local agencies and the communities they serve. Unless law enforcement is asking for help, they're warning against overreach, and that should speak volumes. The presence of additional federal troops doesn't guarantee order. It often brings more tension, more disruption, and more chances for something to go dangerously wrong. So there's no need for the Marines to be deployed. So here are my budget questions though. What is the current cost for what is taking place in California? And how is it going to affect this budget or the budget we're currently serving under? How much are these deployments going to cost for both the Marines and the National Guard? And what training or duties are not taking place because of these deployments? Where in your limited budget, sir, are you going to find in the remainder of this fiscal year the money to cover these deployments? What holes are being created? Well, Congresswoman, thank you for the question. You are right. We are both. Originally from Minnesota. Which is why I recall 2020 quite well, when Governor Walz abandoned the police precinct and allowed it to be burned to the ground. And also allowed 5 days of chaos to occur inside the streets of Minneapolis. Representative Betty McCollum isn't pulling any punches. And she's asking the question every taxpayer should be asking. Who's footing the bill for Trump's decision to deploy Marines and National Guard troops to Los Angeles? In a tense back and forth with Hegseth, the spotlight turns to the cost and budget implications of this move, which smells more like political theater than legitimate crisis response. Mccollum demanded specifics. What budget is being rated to pay for this deployment? Which programs are being cut or deferred to make this show of force happen? Hegseth, instead of giving a straight answer, tried to deflect by pointing to the chaos in Minneapolis under Governor Walz, but that doesn't address the core issue. This isn't about what happened 2 years ago in another city. This is about transparency and fiscal responsibility in real time. Mccollum's grilling wasn't just about dollars and cents. It was about priorities, governance, and the dangerous precedent of using military force as a political stunt without clear oversight or justification. The police precinct, ma'am, was abandoned and burned to the ground. And because of that, the National Guard was eventually far too late mobilized. And President Trump recognizes a situation like that, improperly hindered by a governor, like it was by Governor Walz, if it gets out of control, is a bad situation for the citizens of any location. So in Los Angeles, we believe that IC, which is a federal law enforcement agency, has the right to safely conduct operations in any state and any jurisdiction in the country, especially after 21 million illegals have crossed our border under the previous administration. ICE ought to be able to do its job, whether it's Minneapolis or Los Angeles. Limited time. I asked a budget. So could the Secretary please address the budget? Thank you. You asked about the situation in Los Angeles, and we believe ICE agents should be allowed to be safe in doing their operations. And we have deployed National Guard and the Marines to protect them in the execution of their duties, because we ought to be able to enforce immigration law in this country, unlike what Governor Walz did in 2020. The federal government is doubling down on its claim that ICE has the authority to operate anywhere in the country, including with the backing of National Guard and even active duty Marines in Los Angeles. That's a bold move and one that's drawing serious scrutiny. In a heated exchange, Representative Mccollum pressed Secretary Hegseth for answers about how this deployment is being funded. Are these troops being pulled from other critical missions? Is money being siphoned from training programs or other parts of the defense budget? These aren't small questions. They strike at the heart of how military force is being used domestically and who is paying for it. The notion that military resources can be reallocated on a whim to support IC without transparent budgeting or strategic justification is raising red flags. If we're going to send troops into American cities, taxpayers deserve to know what's being sacrificed and why this is suddenly a priority. There are 17,000 LAPD. You mentioned that there would be 18,000 if not for the defund movement that folks like Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass have implemented. The police chief said she was overwhelmed. As to the budgetary questions, I will yield back my time if the Secretary refuses to answer the budgetary questions I put before him. They're important. What training missions aren't happening? Where are you pulling the money from? And how? Are you planning this moving forward? These are budget questions that affect this committee and the decisions we're going to be making in a couple of hours. If you're not going to answer them, please let the chairman know, and I will take back my time, and I will yield it back to the chairman. Mr. Secretary, why don't you just let us know what accounts you're pulling the money from to fund? Thankfully, unlike the previous administration, we've got a 13% increase in our defense budget, and we will have the capabilities to cover down on contingencies, which is something the National Guard and the Marines plan for. So, we have the funding to cover down on contingencies, especially